Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Virtual Investor KOL Connect segment. My name is Janine Thomas. I am CEO of JTCIR, and I will be the moderator for today's event. I am very pleased to be joined by Tom Equels. He is CEO of Immunotech, and we are very grateful to also be joined by Professor Dr. Casper van Eijck. He is Pancreato-biliary surgeon and professor at Erasmus Medical Center, as well as a consultant for Immunotech. Gentlemen, welcome.
Hello, Janine. It's great to be back.
So happy to have you. And before we get started, I just want to remind our audience that AIM is publicly listed on the NYSE American and trades under the ticker AIM. And during today's discussion, the company will be making forward-looking statements. And I encourage everyone to view the company's latest SEC filings on their website at aimimmuno.com for the latest information. All right, gentlemen, we are going to dive right in. Our focus today is pancreatic cancer. Tom, you made a deliberate decision to prioritize Ampligen in pancreatic cancer. Can you walk us through what drove that strategic shift and why now is the right time to focus resources here?
Certainly, Janine. We repurposed Ampligen in late 2016 to have a focus in oncology. And as a part of that, we were able to get various grant-sponsored clinical trials underway in a number of different solid tumors. And this was very important because it established, because we got positive data in all those tumors, that Ampligen has a very broad spectrum impact because of the way it works. It is a toll-like 3 receptor agonist that has anti-tumor impacts, tumor stabilization impacts that are common across this spectrum of tumors. But our very first program that we initiated, the first person dosed as a part of this program, was in a late-stage pancreatic cancer. Working with Dr. van Eijck and his team at Erasmus, we undertook a named patient program, sometimes called early access program, in the Netherlands, approved by the Dutch government, which allowed us to treat these late-stage pancreatic cancer patients. And this is a very difficult area for therapeutic clinical trials, because the mortality rate is not only very high, but death comes very rapidly to many of these subjects. So we, working together, we dove right in, and that early access program finished up a little bit over a year and a half ago. And we treated, I think, a total of 82 subjects, as all the final information comes in. And the findings from that were extremely positive. This was Ampligen as a monotherapy, showing in a number of different stratifications significant extensions of progression-free survival and overall survival from well-matched historical controls. So that was important, but also what's important is, from a business standpoint, is pancreatic cancer is one of the fastest growing lethal malignancies in the world. The death totals between Europe, the United States, and Japan approach 150,000 a year. Those are the three major pharmaceutical markets, and you have 150,000 a year dying from this cancer, and it moves very rapidly. So it's this lethal malignancy is a huge unmet medical need. In the course of all this, we developed intellectual property and orphan drug designations to protect Ampligen and its market as we go forward, which made the business decision, which we recently made, to solely focus on Ampligen for pancreatic cancer, going forward with a pivotal trial designed to seek new drug approval as our next business step, as compared to other cancers where we had positive data, but not the same level of market or market protection that we have with Ampligen in pancreatic cancer.
That's a great segue, Tom, for my next question. So what makes pancreatic cancer particularly compelling for Ampligen from both a scientific and commercial standpoint?
Well, from a scientific standpoint, the Dr. van Eijck and the team at Erasmus have accumulated a tremendous amount of positive data from the 80-some subjects in the early access program, and the work that we're doing in collaboration with Erasmus and AstraZeneca in our DuraPanc study, which is combining Ampligen with AstraZeneca's PD-L1 checkpoint inhibitor, durvalumab. So scientifically, the Dr. Van Eijck is certainly better to go into the details of the why for that. But scientifically, those results are very important, and they become the foundation for our business decisions related to moving forward to commercialize this therapy for this large group of patients that's in need. When you look at 150,000 people dying between the three major pharmaceutical markets in the world, Japan, the United States, and Europe, you're looking at a need that we have an obligation, if we can, to make a difference. And one of the things that I'm so grateful about is the relationship that we've worked out with Erasmus, because they too are committed to making a difference in pancreatic cancer, because they know what that's like on the ground.
Excellent. So, Tom, how does this focus sharpen AIM's overall development strategy, and what does success look like over the next 12 to 24 months?
Well, the next few months have a number of different, let's call them milestones or inflection points. First of all, in DuraPanc, the phase 2, in collaboration with Erasmus and AstraZeneca, we do mid-year and year-end reports. We're committed to try and have a report out on June 1st that shows our progress mid-year and allows us to see what results, positive or negative, may be accruing during this last 6 months period. Now, on top of that, we will, right about that same time, complete enrollment. Now, one of the beautiful things about the work that we've been doing with Erasmus and in the Netherlands is that sometimes it's very hard to get enrollment into late-stage pancreatic cancer studies. But our successes, which are well known in Europe, have resulted in a demand, to participate, from the patient standpoint, because it gives them a meaningful alternative therapeutically, and so we have people in line. We expect enrollment will be finished in just a few months, and from that, at the end of the year, we anticipate being able to have the data in necessary to look at our primary endpoint. The primary endpoint of this study is clinical benefit, which is composed of disease stabilization, partial responses, and complete responses. And thus far, we have great hopes and a positive attitude related to disease stabilization, but the data is preliminary. So, but at year end, we should have data to analyze that primary endpoint. And then 6 months after that, we'll be wrapping up the data for our over secondary endpoint of progression-free survival and overall survival. Overall survival, we're taking a longer period of time to look at so that we can be able to show what successes we have with people living an extended period of time. Based upon that, we have taken the step, and this was in conjunction with Thermo Fisher Scientific, who had a very strong interest in preparing to design this phase 3 trial. Now, I anticipate we will be working very closely in that process with Erasmus, Professor Dr. Van Eijck, and the Dr. Holmes and her team at Erasmus in DuraPanc, in order to come up with a trial design that optimizes the opportunity to get an approval of this therapy so that it will be available to people worldwide.
I think we're going to shift now to kind of the unmet need in pancreatic cancer as well as the patient journey. So, Professor Van Eijck, we're going to kind of have a couple questions with you here. So, can you frame the current standard of care in pancreatic cancer and where the biggest gaps still exist?
Well, the point is that 80% of patients are actually already diagnosed either with locally advanced or metastatic disease. So the only treatment option for those patients is actually systemic chemotherapy, which consists of FOLFIRINOX, which is considered a very toxic treatment. And what we know is that about 30 to 40% of patients actually do not even respond to FOLFIRINOX. And those patients who have stable disease after FOLFIRINOX, they develop progressive disease already after 4 to 5 months. So that's, in our opinion, an opportunity window to start what we call maintenance therapy. So that means we try to activate the immune system in order to defend itself after the treatment with FOLFIRINOX. And that is what we are calling maintenance therapy. And therefore, we started the trial, which Tom already described. And what I should mention also is that the results are also published in peer review journal like Cancer. So that's important, in my opinion, to say, because it also got a lot of references. So therefore, we started actually the Duripunk study in those patients who had stable disease after FOLFIRINOX. But those are the patients, the 80% of patients, either with locally advanced or metastatic pancreatic cancer.
So, as far as thinking of the patient journey from diagnosis through treatment, what does a typical patient journey look like today, and where are the most critical points of failure?
I stay with the patients with either locally advanced or metastatic because those are the patients we are treating with Ampligen. So the normal journey is that they receive either 8 to 12 cycles of FOLFIRINOX. If they don't have severe toxicity, because that often happens during that period. And when they have progressive disease, then in some centers we are giving second line chemotherapy, but that only works in about 10 to 20% of those patients. So the mean survival time of those patients after FOLFIRINOX is about 4 to 6 months. Because when they have progressive disease, it goes very fast. So therefore, again, we try to start as soon as possible in order to activate the immune system. And that we are doing in the Duripunk trial with the combination of Ampligen and durvalumab.
Despite advances in this space, the outcomes remain poor. What are the key unmet needs that new therapies must address to move the needle here?
Well, in my opinion, what is very important, of course, is to try to elongate the survival time, to slow down the progression rate. But most importantly is also to consider in any new treatment you are going to give the quality of life of those patients. And that's something we are very happy that we've noticed in the early access program, which Tom mentioned, that indeed the quality of life of the patients who were on treatment was extremely well. And also in the new study, in the Duripunk study, where we do the combination therapy, the quality of life of the patient is very good. So they don't have any signs of toxicity at all. So that's really, in my opinion, also very important.
Let's, I guess, dive a little bit deeper here into Ampligen. Professor, how does Ampligen's mechanism of action align with what we now understand about pancreatic cancer biology and the tumor microenvironment?
That's a very good question. Of course, what we know is that in general, you can say that pancreatic cancer is a very immunosuppressive tumor. So that means, therefore, normal immunotherapy like checkpoint inhibitors, they don't work. But what was really striking to find in the early access program already was that indeed the Ampligen, the toll-like 3 receptor agonism, that really drive DC, so dendritic cell maturation, monocyte expansion, and T cell proliferation. All those cells which are extremely important in defending against circulating and also existing tumors. So that's really important. And what we found when we combined it with the durvalumab is that we could really demonstrate that we have a strong enhancement of the innate and adaptive immune activation. So that is extremely important. And that, from a scientific point of view, is very interesting. And we hope, of course, in the phase 2 study that we can also see that this mechanism of action will benefit the patients.
So, from your perspective, what is most compelling about Ampligen's approach compared to the other emerging therapies?
Well, first of all, let's come back again to the quality of life. I mean, to give a new treatment as a maintenance therapy and still have a good quality of life, in my opinion, is extremely important. And then seeing this mechanism of action, what we are seeing, that really, we hope it will translate also in an elongation of the progression. It will benefit the patients in terms of overall survival. But most importantly is that it gives us also other opportunities to combine it probably also again with other new developed immunotherapeutics like CD40 agonist, etc., etc. So the mechanism of action of Ampligen, in my opinion, is extremely strong, and we should figure out what Ampligen could do. Also, for instance, in patients, you were talking about vaccines before. It can also be very possible. We are also developing cancer vaccines that Ampligen could really be of benefit in those patients. So we're not done yet with Ampligen.
All right, so let's move to the data here. Tom, just briefly summarize the key findings from prior Ampligen studies in pancreatic cancer and what signals you believe are most meaningful.
The early access program, when we first started, I think everybody, was very cautious, and it's hard to be optimistic in treating late stage pancreatic cancer patients. But we began to see very early on in that program a number of things that suggested that we were having a positive impact with Ampligen as a monotherapy on disease stabilization. And the data from that early access program, as it came in, showed increases compared to historical controls, significant increases in both progression-free survival and especially overall survival. And then some of the biological markers, immunological markers like CA19-9, which is a classic pancreatic cancer tumor immunomarker, a carbohydrate antigen that is known to be indicative. When you looked at CA19-9 levels below 1,000, there's a tremendous jump seen in survival data. Similarly, with the neutrophil lymphocyte ratios below 4.5, again, a big difference. So that early access program study was so important to me anyway, in understanding that we had to go forward with this because we were making a difference in people's lives, people who really had no hope, and I could see that difference, when I would visit Erasmus. So, that helped me in my commitment to what we were doing.
I guess moving forward here, Tom, you stated you're actively working on the design and plan execution of your pivotal study for Ampligen. When do you expect to meet with FDA and roll out that plan?
We have, between Erasmus, the team at Erasmus, and Thermo Fisher Scientific, what I consider to be, in this space, the foremost experts in the world regarding clinical activity and clinical paths related to this disease. And so that design activity is underway. We're gonna at AIM, we're gonna try and follow a path that's laid out for us by Thermo Fisher Scientific and Erasmus, and saying this is the way forward. And we believe that a properly designed phase 3, especially when we're aware of the immunological markers that stratify response, gives us an opportunity to test Ampligen in a phase 3 environment where we, have a reasonable expectation. We're not done with the phase 2 yet, and as Dr. Van Eijck correctly points out, it's hard to talk about the data from a phase 2 until you have all the data in. The only thing that we have all the data in right now is the early access program or named patient program, which is not structured or controlled in a way where you could have the same rigor that you'll see in that phase 2, and even more so in the phase 3. But it's my expectation that this will be designed to have a trial that builds on the strengths that Ampligen has demonstrated so far to increase the likelihood of the positive data necessary for drug approval, either in the United States, Europe, or both. And I leave it to those experts in large part to help me decide where we go first, who we talk to, when we talk to them. That's the whole point of hiring top experts in the field. And I don't think from a design standpoint, it gets any better than our PPD Thermo Fisher Scientific team.
As we think about looking ahead, where do you envision Ampligen fitting into the treatment paradigm? Early line, combination setting, maintenance, etc. What are your thoughts there?
The strong point of this treatment is that the quality of life of the patient remains very good. So the earlier you can start with this kind of treatment, the better it will be. That's for sure. So it should be integrated in the complete treatment protocol of patients with metastatic and also with patients with locally advanced pancreatic cancer. So what for us is very important is that we, with the immunological expert, look at the scientific data from this DURIPANC study and then see what will be the most successful way to move forward in this kind of patients. Because there isn't a very strong immune activation, that's obviously, but we should get insight in what is actually exactly happen and how we can enhance it any further. Therefore, we really need a lot of expert people as well, and we are very lucky at Erasmus and also in other parts of the Netherlands, where we present all the data and then we move on with it. But then the next step for sure will be, in my opinion, a phase 3 trial.
May I address a sort of a nuance on that element that just so people understand? Our first work in pancreatic cancer was in the early access program, named patient program, and that lasted several years, and developed a great deal of progression-free survival and overall survival data related to quality of life. But it was not a clinical trial. It was a compassionate care of essentially program. So a lot of the analysis of the immunological and biological markers, scans, biopsies, things like that are built into the experimental endpoints of the phase 2 that's underway right now were not available to us in the early access program. So there are things that we're learning right now about how Ampligen works, what its impact is, what the markers are that might help us to, properly design a phase 3 that's built for success, is coming out of that analysis. And we won't know what that analysis is probably for another several months, 6 months maybe or more.
Excellent. Glad you jumped in with that, Tom. Very helpful. So, Professor, one last question for you. If Ampligen continues to show positive results, how could it change the way you treat patients in practice?
Well, I think it will be obvious, as I mentioned, because the strong point of this treatment is that the quality of life of the patient remains very good. So the earlier you can start with this kind of treatment, the better it will be. That's for sure. So it should be integrated in the complete treatment protocol of patients with metastatic and also with patients with locally advanced pancreatic cancer. So it should be completely included in the new treatment.
What are the next milestones investors can expect? So just kind of outline briefly, what investors should look towards from a milestone perspective for AIM.
I mentioned, certain of the inflection points that are coming up that are related to the ongoing phase 2. These are very important. This mid-year report, which will probably be out in 4 or 5 weeks, 6 weeks at most, is assuming that it follows the trend that we saw in the year-end report and the mid-year report before that. Provides us insight as to how that phase 2 DuraPanc is moving forward. Additionally, right about the same time as the mid-year report should come out, shortly after that, we should have an announcement that we've completed enrollment. Primary endpoint here, the analysis of that should begin at the end of this year. And the analysis of the secondary endpoint, which is overall survival, will begin at the middle of next year. So these things are, in a tight sequence, and positive results as we go through that sequence will be encouraging and instructive for our phase 3 activity.
Tom, definitely an exciting time for AIM. First of all, congratulations on all your work so far. Such an important area, pancreatic cancer, so many issues with patients and challenges, and you're giving hope. And that's so important. Professor Van Eijck, really appreciate all of your input today. And with that, this does conclude the Virtual Investor KOL Connect segment featuring AIM Immunotech. And as a reminder, AIM trades on the NYSE American under the ticker AIM. And I'd like to thank Professor Dr. Van Eijck and Tom Equels for joining us today. And I'd also like to thank our audience for your time and attention. And if you like what you saw today, I encourage you to visit AIM's website at aimimmuno.com and follow their social channels on X, LinkedIn, and Facebook to stay current on the latest information. And to access all of our virtual investor events, you can visit virtualinvestorco.com. Gentlemen, thank you again. Tom, congratulations on all of your progress and hope to have you back soon to hear more about it. Wish everyone a great rest of your day.